welcome to the Fireside chat on the Agri-Investors Story as part of the Explore Do Business Jamaica Investment Conference. My name is Daphne Ewing Chow. I am a senior contributor with Forbes in the area of food, agriculture, and sustainability. I am also the head of content for Luke K-Man, and I am also a communication specialist with the World Food Programme. Joining me in this discussion as we look at the Agri-Investors Story is Mr. David Martin. He is the Director of Business Consulting at the Jamaica Producers Group and possesses over 19 years of experience, executive management experience garnered in the agribusiness and manufacturing environments. He has been with the Jamaica Producers Group for 15 years, where he has held a variety of executive positions that provide direct management and/or governance oversight for all the food production subsidiaries operating in the Caribbean. David's role transitioned in January 2021 to JPG Director Business Consulting, with a mandate to support JPG's current acquisitive mode, while simultaneously maintaining operational oversight of the Caribbean food business. So we definitely have an expert engaging with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So nice to have you. So nice to have you, David. Investments in agriculture are currently on the rise, as is the opportunity to leverage ag tech in Jamaica's strategic location to tap into the global supply chain for fresh produce. And investment in Jamaica's 4,440,000 hectares of agricultural land for the local population of almost 3 million, plus approximately 4 million tourists visiting annually, presents a strong foundation for investment in agriculture. Further supported by the growing demand globally for Jamaican cuisine. This session is going to share an insight on JPG's success stories for investments in agriculture and highlight the current opportunities. And I just want to backtrack to your bio where it mentioned that you've had a transition in roles to suit the acquisitive mission of JPG. Can you tell me more about that? I mean, we're in a climate right now where so many businesses are hurting, and it just seems like JPG has actually strengthened during this crisis, where you've expanded operations, your profits have doubled. What is the secret here?
Well, okay, so as a group, I mean, all the acquisitive modes that we've gotten into in the past, if you check it, all of them occurred around time of crises, because we've always, as a rule, maintain a strong balance sheet where we would have good cash reserves to take advantage of any emerging opportunities. So right now, the world is going through a crisis, and in crisis, there are opportunities. There are businesses that go into a bit of distress, and the owners lose passion, to continue the business, and we're there looking for good opportunities in either food and drinks, or logistics and infrastructure. And right now we are doing acquisitions on both sides. And if you've been tracking us in recent past, I mean, we did an investment in Geese Shipping Line in the UK. We just bought a juice company in Spain, just bought an ice and water company in the Dominican Republic. And there are a couple other acquisitions on the burner as we speak.
Can you tell me more about that, or is that something that you're not prepared to disclose as yet?
No, I can't disclose it. They'll emerge in the news as they all do over the next few weeks.
So let me ask you a question based off of what you just said. Obviously, you go through a process and decide what areas you want to invest in further. What are the investment opportunities for agri-processing in Jamaica itself, and also globally in terms of Jamaica produce and value added?
All right, so speaking specifically about Jamaican agriculture, so what are the opportunities? As far as the market goes, so you have a local opportunity within our geographic space. It's driven by both the local population as well as the visiting population. So you have 3 million Jamaicans, and then you have like about 4 million that come here to enjoy the salmon sea and the Jamaican cuisine. And then there is an overseas market for Jamaicans. So Jamaicans overseas are prepared to pay a premium for our fruits or veg. And that's a unique opportunity for people growing crops here in Jamaica. So those are the obvious opportunities. There are less obvious ones, which I think as the technology develops, for things like vertical farming or greenhouse growing. I mean, there's strong greenhouse growing technology in the region, certainly like in the Dominican Republic. But as more and more of that kind of technology gets applied in our local situation, I think some new opportunities will emerge. So I've just stated the obvious ones, and then there are some new ones that are emerging.
So am I hearing then that there are going to be some investments on your side within these types of technologies, vertical farming?
Well, we've studied it. I looked closely at it 2 years ago. And at the time, I decided to park it because I'm watching what happens in the cost of energy space. The most important variable for vertical farming would be the cost of energy. And energy is quite expensive in Jamaica. But what I find interesting is the cost of renewables. Solar power combined with batteries is coming down, and I think at some stage it's going to get to a point where people can look at this kind of investment seriously.
Right. Yeah, and I think that is why the region has been a little bit slower to adopt these technologies, just for that reason. Yeah. So then let's come back to traditional field farming. Obviously, with climate change, farmers are struggling now everywhere throughout the region. We're highly vulnerable to climate change related impacts. What has been the secret for JPG in this regard?
Well, let's start with what exactly is changing in the climate. So what we've seen, if you look at rainfall for the last 10 years, the rainfall in Jamaica, or certainly in St. Mary where we grow bananas, you'll have as low as 420 millimeters of water falling during the course of the year, to 2020 as high as 1,600 millimeters. So you have a huge swing in the amount of rainfall you have. And then temperature, the temperature has remained relatively stable for Jamaican norms. What can be a bit odd at times is the timing of it. So you'll get what we call a cold snap, but cold is relative. But when you're growing pineapples, for example, if you get 17 degrees Celsius for 2 days, that's going to result in natural flowering. So, and then you're going to get a peak 5 months later, and that peak can come at odd times. In other words, it doesn't occur when you expect it in June. Instead, it happens in August, so you have some funny dynamics that occur because of that. Now, having set that as a foundation, the thing to think about now is when you're growing crops is how do you adjust for that? And so you have to adapt. And so if you ask me what's our secret sauce, is kind of understanding the adaptation that's necessary and then adapt accordingly. So remember, I mentioned earlier that we would have years of only 400 millimeters of rain. And for a long period of time, as a business, we underinvested in drainage. And then we had good investment in irrigation. What we've been forced to do is to make sure that we're properly invested in drainage just as much as we're in irrigation. So obviously, it drives up your cost a little bit, but what it does is it allows you to thrive regardless of what Mother Nature throws at you. And then outside of that, I mean, I would say the secret ingredients for us would be, well, you have a very committed leadership to having a farm. The farm continues to represent a small part of the business. Certainly today it's a small part of the business, but we do it because it's in our DNA, first and foremost. We've always been in agriculture. We have a fondness for the community in which we operate the farm. So we are very close to the community and we do all sorts of things for the community. And from that community comes a team of dedicated staff, and you have to lead them with experts. So we have a general manager and 2 crop experts that are, they are expert. And then bring the methods now, the way we run the farms. So it's all about seeking and identifying global best practices at all times. There are things emerging all the way, new learnings. So you have to actively look for them and then incorporate them. If you visit our farm, you'll see a culture of comprehensive measurement and evaluation. We even track the quality of the work done by the employees, and they get feedback on that weekly, and it affects their pay. So there are incentives linked to their compliance with the procedures, the work procedures, which is measured. And I mean, after that, I started with the climate adaptation first. There's active thought to how we adapt to climate change, because apart from the rainfall and the temperature, it brings new pressures with some of the diseases that you have to deal with. Meaning it's not quite the same every year, the way the pests and diseases behave.
So it sounds to me like it's a combination of the scientific side and the human side of it, and you can't divorce one from the other.
Precisely, yeah.
I think another area that you're highly recognized for is the fact that you're so well vertically integrated within your operation. I'm going to ask you a 2-pronged question. One is, I'd like for you to speak further about this vertical integration, how the fact that, you basically manage the entire process from concept to the farm to distribution to the shelf. So I'd like for you to speak about that being a part of your success. And I'd also like for you to explain to me, for people who are interested in investing in agri-processing and might not have the kind of investment funds required to be as large as you. Obviously, a vertically integrated business will manage to achieve a certain level of scale that a smaller business wouldn't. What would be your advice to a smaller business trying to get into the same space as you? So 2-pronged question.
All right, so let me explain the vertical integration first. The one key advice I have for people is, as a principle, you're not going to find it feasible to grow a crop in Jamaica with the intention of processing it to compete with other similarly processed foods out there in the world. What you have to do is you're going to fetch the greater value from the fresh product. So when you grow bananas, as we do, we fetch the most value from selling it as fresh bananas for peeling and eating. But we have a business in banana chips and a business in banana bread. Now, what we're actually doing is taking fruit that has blemishes on it, that the consumer doesn't want to buy fresh. Nobody wants to buy a banana with scratches on it. So we take scratched fruit and we make chips with it, or we ripen it and make banana bread. So the starting point have to be that you're going to set up a processing plant where there's a large scale production of whatever the raw material is. And you want to get the rejects from that to do your processing. That's a very important insight I'm sharing, because I tried for about 5 years to grow bananas to make chips, and I gave up. That was a waste of time. The farm became profitable when I focused on driving up the percentage of the bunch that ends up in front of a consumer for fresh consumption. That's when we cracked making the farm profitable. So that's absolutely crucial. So in terms of value adding, what we do today is we value add bananas to make chips and then banana bread. The chips, we're actually doing the snack manufacturer in the Dominican Republic. And the banana bread we do here. We do plantain chips and we do plantain tostones, which is a frozen food now. We do breadfruit chips and breadfruit tostones, cassava chips and cassava, a frozen cassava stick. And we do these in pretty large scale. I mean, the banana chips business, or certainly the banana plantain breadfruit cassava chips, I mean, we're selling those in many countries. It's available in the US, in Cayman, in Canada, in the UK, several Caribbean countries. And we do a brand for Latin America, for the Dominican Republic, and for Panama. So we have a big chips business, and then frozen tostones, breadfruit in particular. We do a lot of that for predominantly Puerto Ricans in the United States, either in Miami or New Jersey, and Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico. So that's another significant business that we do in value adding, as you call it. Back to the original insight, the idea, you have to, there's just not enough throwaway fruit in Jamaica to support the size business that we have in these value add. That's the reason we had to relocate it to the Dominican Republic.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I never even thought of that. So what steps are taken? Obviously, the most recent statistic is 33% of all food gets wasted between the farm and consumption. What steps is JPG taking to cut down on that wastage? And you just mentioned a huge one, of course.
Well, so for our banana farm, I mean, we've managed to drive the fresh saleable component to 96%. So the wastage is only 4%. I remember the days when JP was exporting fruit to the UK. And at that time, that number was 80%. And we had 20% rejects. And that's how our chips business started, because we had 20% fruit that we were dumping in a hole on the farm. And we decided we could take it to do something. And that's how we ended up in the banana chips business.
That is so fascinating to me, because there are so many US companies right now that are marketing themselves off of this model and getting so much exposure around this. And this is just your standard protocol and the way you do business, and not a part of your business that you are, promoting as, this differentiator, but basically you're upcycling fruit that would have typically been thrown away, which is huge for the environment.
Yeah.
So
I think there are products, like if you take tomato paste or tomato ketchup, a lot of that stuff is done as a matter of routine from farms that grow exclusively to make canned tomato paste or tomato ketchup. And I think the script is flipped in that situation, where the fresh component would be a smaller percentage. But for certainly the crops I've been exposed to, I've found you want to do as much as possible fresh. So if you're doing coconuts, for example, you want as much of the water to end up in a bottle being sold as fresh coconut water, or you have a situation where people will just dress up the coconut and sell a whole coconut to consumers. Or if you're going to chop it and pour it in a bottle and seal it, that's fresh coconut water. Then the quote unquote rejects fruits from that is what you can, contemplate for other value added use. And coconuts are fascinating crop, because you can use every part of the coconut for something.
Absolutely. And that brings me to my next question is, what do you think are the most strategic crops for Jamaica right now?
All right. So akis, I call akis first because there is greater demand for akis than there are akis in Jamaica right now. So I think that's an opportunity for an investor. Coconuts, I think, is an opportunity for somebody who wants to go big. Avocado is a crop that we're actively looking at right now, because there's an appetite for avocado all year round. And the Dominican Republic is the only country I've seen where you can eat avocado all year round, because they have so many different varieties that they grow at orchard scale to support the market. So I would say those, and then, specifically for the local market and the tourists, the 7 million mouths that I mentioned earlier, I think there's an opportunity around a whole range of vegetables using modern technology, greenhouse type growing and packing, things like onions and potatoes. People are actually starting to invest in those. And then, there'll be esoteric stuff like mushrooms that people could look at. But yeah, that's just to give you a flavor. I think there's quite a lot of things that people could throw money at. I mean, we have actively been investing in pineapples, bananas for years, and we're now adding plantains to the mix in Jamaica because we think there's a fresh opportunity for plantains here.
I mean, you're throwing so many puns, a fresh opportunity, a new flavor. For me as a writer, I'm like, oh, that's he's saying it so beautifully. So in terms of agriculture for Jamaica, I think obviously Jamaica is one of the countries in CARICOM that is very strategically placed when it comes to agriculture. Where do you think agriculture is going to go in the future, let's say within the next 10 years in Jamaica?
Well, I think there's an acceptance in Jamaica, especially with the recent COVID experience and the pressure on supply chains as we speak, for some level of localist. We need a local production base. You can't rely on imports for food all the time. So just as a matter of policy, the government is very supportive of a thriving agricultural sector, just for purely, being able to feed ourselves on one level. And then on another level, there's an acknowledgement here that there is markets overseas that we can tap, with various crops. I mean, there are crops that we're doing successfully already, like coffee, but then there are other crops like coconuts that I mentioned earlier that is an obvious opportunity for Jamaica that's not being tackled right now.
From an export perspective, how is Jamaica unique? Because I do believe Jamaica is in a very unique position, both by its location and its large farming lands. How is Jamaica unique in terms of from the export perspective?
But we're finding it very easy to get our fruits to Cayman, to the US and to Canada and the UK. The cost of transport is competitive relative to the contents of the container. So I'm not seeing a logistical issue, meaning a market access issue. Jamaica doesn't have a problem with US customs, or there's a general acceptance of the full range of products that we produce here. There were restrictions in the past, but a lot of them have disappeared in the last 10 years. So from that standpoint, I think investors don't have to worry about their ability to access markets, both market access as well as the logistical cost of getting stuff to the market.
And would you say that there is an extra opportunity for exports within the region with COVID and all the supply chain issues going on in the North American market?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just speaking from my experience. All the markets that I have called are markets that I've found very receptive to our products, and I've been exploiting those. But I'm aware that Trinidad, for example, is a potential opportunity for Jamaican growers, and there are people who are actively exporting things there. But a lot of us tend to look north as opposed to south, and I'm referring to us here in Jamaica.
For sure, I think the entire Caribbean
looks north.
Absolutely, that's something we need to get past for sure.
What for me is a big opportunity for Jamaica is concentrating a bit more on the Spanish Caribbean market. So the Dominican Republic has 11 million people with a higher GDP per cap than Jamaica. So they are a large consumer market that we should look at, but they are strong agriculturally, so you have to come good to compete with them.
So what other challenges then would Jamaica face? Obviously, yes, the Latin American market is, you definitely, it's harder breaking in there because of how strong their agriculture is. What other challenges would somebody who wants to begin exporting, would they face that you've noticed?
All right. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the trick for growing here in Jamaica is to grow cost effectively. Now, so what are the cost issues to think about? So we have these advantages, with pretty uniform temperature all year round. We have good sunlight. Yes, the weather can have extremes in terms of the amount of rainfall, but you can plan for that. It has a cost implication, but yes, you can plan for it. What I've found with our farm, if you take our banana farm in St. Mary, we have 8 different soil types for the 400 acres that we have. And for every different soil type, you have to, your blend that you use to fertilize needs to be tweaked depending on the soil type. So we have to actively think about that. In terms of, you have to be very, what I call KPI driven, key performance indicator driven. So you have to watch closely your productivity, your crop yield. And I mean, we track it by subsections, meaning, so we break up the 400 acres into blocks as small as, between 3 and 5 acres, and we're tracking the productivity of each block. And labor is linked to blocks. So you can speak to the team that services a block. This is what's happening on your block. And not just the yielding, I'm talking about the quality of the fruit, everything. The cost that goes into that plot of land. Being able to control, your irrigation and drainage, routine soil analysis, capturing rainfall because it's a factor, and paying attention to it. You have to modify what you're doing depending on what's happened the last month. You need your IT system that supports all of that. You need a good IT system. So the relationship you have with the staff, pay for performance. Jamaicans respond very well to that. So yeah, that's
So fascinating.
Yeah, another challenge, I didn't mention it, and I'm going to tell you a solution. A challenge in Jamaica historically has been predial larceny, where you have people will steal your crop. What we have done, we've been able to remove all our daytime security and co-opt the help of our staff in advising security if there's somebody in their space that shouldn't be there. And it's worked beautifully. We've saved all that money in daytime security, and the staff is who's made it possible.
I want to be a fly on the wall. And obviously you've been with JP for a while, so you have obviously seen the introduction of a number of products that have gone to market. Walk me through in short form what it looks like from concept to market when you think, and maybe give me an example of a product.
All right. So let's use plantains as an example, because we're actively investing in plantains. So it's in the early phase of the development cycle. So we would have cottoned on to the idea that Jamaicans are increasingly interested in plantains. And we noticed this from a shift from banana chips to plantain chips in our market space. 10 years ago, Jamaicans would only eat banana chips. Today is 50-50. So we decided, there must be an opportunity with fresh plantains. And so a project like that would have started with estimating what we think the market will absorb in plantains, working backwards and determining, well, how many acres of plantain we need to establish. Having done that, we've identified the land that we want to put it on. And the biggest problem actually was planting material, the tissue culture to propagate plantain trees, because you can't get them locally, we have to import them. And you can't import them from any country because there's a thing called TR4, Tropical Race 4. is this horrible disease that's wiping out all Musa type crops in East Asia and it's now in Colombia and a couple other places. And, there's suspicion of it in Central America. So our authorities do not want any planting material from any of those regions. So as it turns out, the only place we can get it from is Cuba. And so we're actively procuring planting material from Cuba. And we're getting them shortly in November here. So we will establish this farm and we should be harvesting by September, October next year. And we will go to market. The marketing team have a plan already. We got set back by the storm we had. When was it? Just a few weeks ago, we had a storm that destroyed the plantings that were established. But we're pressing along because we see an opportunity there.
It's fascinating. And where are you planning to export to?
In the first instance, everything's for Jamaica.
Okay.
In the first instance, once we get it settled down, all those systems that I talked about, the KPIs, the people, the training, once all of that is settled down and we're comfortable that the systems are all good, then we will start to expand it beyond Jamaica needs.
Okay, well, that's actually a great segue into my final question for you, which is, how do we take consumer tastes and keep them local? Because obviously we in the region are importing so much US food and not looking at our local foods. What is the role of JP and other producers within the region?
Well, let me share a little secret with you. I don't know if you've experienced this, but as a Jamaican, the best tasting bananas I've ever had were the ones I had in Jamaica. Whereas when I'm in America and I buy some bananas in the supermarket there, they're just never quite as good. And you know why that is? It's because it's not fresh. The bananas you eat in Jamaica would have been harvested the week before, whereas the ones you have in the US were harvested 6 weeks before. So that is the secret sauce. The reason why food, sometimes you find it tastes so good in Jamaica is because the ingredients are all grown here. It's not quite the same. So if you ask me about local versus foreign appetite, for me, a big part of it is the freshness of whatever it is. And you can get fresh food in the US. When you go to a farmer's market, you're getting fresh food and you're going to find the quality of it is just so much better than the stuff you pluck off, a shelf in Walmart or wherever. So that to me is what it's about. So is if you have a brand and the brand is associated with fresh from the farm and you can cause that to happen with your product, you have an edge. And then Jamaicans have this thing in their head that as long as it says made in Jamaica, they want it.
That's good.
It's just a loyalty to Jamaican food. And that's
a great thing. That's a great thing. That's a great thing. And of course, with the fact that you're vertically integrated also means that your supply chains are shorter. So that makes it even fresher. Yeah.
Yeah, our staff is putting the bananas on the supermarket shelf in Jamaica.
That's fantastic. That's amazing. I think you're the perfect person to provide this sort of perspective, just because you're able to bring in all angles of the supply chain. This has been so fascinating for me, and I'm so grateful to have had this conversation. It was so lovely to meet you.
Nice meeting you too, Daphne. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.